Hey everybody, it's Travis speaking. Today I'd like to cover a topic that we haven't really got into too much. I want to get into some of the families that you'll see in a Revit structural model. So today what we're going to take a look at is how to put together a simple truss family. You can see I've got one already set up here, and these different member colors, you're seeing pink, there's black in there, green and blue. What these represent are the top, bottom, and the webs. So you've got top chord, bottom chord, you can see denoted by pink and blue, and then we've got the webs vertical in black, and the diagonals are in green. So this lets Revit calculate what it has to, and you can see that I've got a whole bunch of equality constraints on this, as well as some other parameters that we can define as instance or type parameters. So why don't we get right to it, and we'll get into a new family. So I'm going to close this one down and click on new and bring it over to our families. And I just want to bring this up to my Imperial templates. So I'm clicking on that English I folder, and I'm just coming down to the bottom where it says structural trusses. So when I open up the structural truss template, you can see that, like before, we have our top chord, webs, bottom chords, but what we need to do is set up our framework first. So I'm just going to pull these dimensions up out of the way, because I'm going to want to be able to flex this and not have to move these all over the place. So I want that top chord in here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a couple reference planes on either side of this origin plane, and to do that I'm just going to use my pick lines option and put in a 10-foot offset. So I get, just clicking on either side of that, I get two more reference planes, and then I can go ahead and dimension these with an equal constraint, and then do one for the overall top chord length. So now if I want to add that top chord length parameter, I need to select my dimension and click on label where it says label up here in the options bar, and I'm going to select add parameter. So I'm going to call this top chord length and change that over to an instance parameter. You'll notice that the group parameter is under dimensions. So when we click OK and we go up to our parameters in the family types button here, we got to locate the dimensions group. So if I scroll down, it's right here at the bottom, and you can see I've got this top chord length. And what I want to do is drive this with a formula so that my top chord length is always a quarter of the length of the truss length here. So I'm going to put in equals truss length divided by 4, and if I hit apply, we should see that move over here. So let me just hit OK, and you can see that 20 divided by 4. So it wasn't really, didn't have to do any calculation, but just to flex that out, if I go in here and I change my truss length to say 60, let's see what happens. It's 600. Okay, so we see these both of these parameters flex as a result of the formula in here. So now we can keep going, and more or less we can start with our bottom and our top chord. I do want to put that step though from the center, so I'm going to put in another reference plane and put that parameter in right away. So again, I'm using the pick lines option. This time I'm just going to use a 3-foot offset, and I'll put that plane in, and now I'll dimension this one. I'll call this one, I'm not really sure the correct terminology, so I'm going to do the same thing as before, and I'll call this one bottom chord step. Okay, so I'll make that one an instance parameter as well, and that way I can change this per truss in the project. So that's set to 3 feet, and now I can start with the chords. Okay, so to get these chords started, I'm going to go to create, and I'll do the top one first, and I want to make sure that I've got chain in here, because what I'm doing is I'm going to constrain this chord to the intersections in of these planes here. So what that does is that infers a constraint, and it makes this all one set of lines. So you can see that I got that lock there. I'm going to come back and dimension that in after the fact. So now that I've got these constrained to those intersections, they should flex with these reference planes if I change them. So I need to align lock this as well so that it goes up and down with the truss height parameter. So I'm going to click AL, and then I'll click on the reference plane and the top piece of chord and hit lock. Okay, so I can flex this out now if I want, but I'm pretty sure I got that one. So I'll just move on to the bottom chord now. So I'm going back to the create panel, hitting the bottom chord, and now I'm going to start here from this bottom part, and I'm just going to go to this next one where my bottom chord step plane is. Okay, so again, making sure that chain is on, and we're bringing that across and back over. So I'll just repeat the process of aligning that and make sure I lock that up. Okay, so now I've got a decent framework that I can start with my webs. So what I'm going to do is do the verticals first. And we have to have this top and bottom in here. Otherwise, when we do our webs, our vertical webs, we're not going to get these inferred constraints that we need. So notice that I've got a snap in here. I'm just going to draw these in. So I'm just going to do three segments. And I want to make sure that I don't hit the midpoint, okay? Because if I go to the midpoint, then that's going to constrain this web so that it's always going to want that in the center of this chord length. So I want to come off of that a little bit, but I do want to make sure that I see a snap on the top chord and then a snap when I bring it straight down to the bottom. So I'll put one more in here and one more in here, and now I'm going to apply all those equal constraints that we saw before. So watch how I dimension these. I'm going to need to put actually a couple more in at the end, so I always seem to forget these guys here. So I need one right there, and I'll lock that one up. One right there, and I'll lock that one up. And this is one of the nice things too. As you're drawing along a reference plane, it asks me right after, hey, do you want this to be locked to that reference plane? And of course I do, so I can just click those right after. So those are some things too that'll kind of speed this up for you as you go along. So I'm referencing the plane and then the actual line for the web and then back to the plane here. So I'm clicking quite a few times, but when I'm all done, I click on the equal constraint and it distributes those evenly along that. I just want to make sure that I get the plane. It's pretty important here. So just get the last of these ones and I'll line those up, spread those out, and then I want to get these guys separately. So I'm going to go plane to the web to the plane, plane to the web to the plane, and now I can toggle these guys on as well. Okay, so this should all spread out accordingly. So last but not least, what we need to do is put those diagonals in, and we'll see those appear in green. And I'm just going to, oh, I need to put another web right here as well. Lots to forget. Okay, so let's start with the diagonals. I'm going to go from one corner back down. Make sure that I get these intersections, and I'll start another one up here. Okay, and something that you can do as well, you don't want to mirror these, but something that you can do which will help you is using the snap toggles. So I'm going from this point up to this one, and you can see if I get some trouble here and it just doesn't want to go to that point, which I just kind of forced it to do, I can always hit SE, and that means snap endpoint. Okay, so same thing for midpoint, it would be SM. So I'm just going to hit SE, and it takes me right to that point. Okay, so I'm just going to connect all these. And then I want to come back and do that same thing on this side. Like I said, you don't want to be, you don't want to mirror these, so you actually need to draw them in. Okay, so again, SE, and notice how it just snaps it into place for me there. Alright. Okay, so one last one here is these can be controlled right now by my bottom chord step, the actual height, or what we can do is we can grab this node here and take it off. It's still align locked to the plane, so as far as its position, it's going to stay in here. And you can see it's saying that it's slightly off, but notice how everything came up with it. those other lengths. Okay, so what I want to do now is put in two more dimensions. One's going to go from the bottom plane to that point. So when I grab that point, I'm not trying to get another plane. I want to actually get that there. So last thing, I just got to make sure that these all go together again. And that's going to snap those constraints back in there. And just connect these guys. Okay, so I've got one in here. Let's grab the other one. Grab that point, come on. Okay, and so these could be unique, or they could be the same thing. I'm going to make them the same thing in this respect, so I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call this one side height. And we'll make that an instance as well. Okay, so right now they're both 4 foot 11/16. I don't want something so random as that. So I'm just going to go in here and make that, we'll make that one 2 feet for the time being. Okay, so I think that that's good to go. We should be able to go in and flex this out. Let's see if we want to flex this geometry, we can. So that's something good to do while you're at this point here. So let's try what's our bottom chord step. Let's make that 4 feet. Hit apply. We can see that moves up nicely. If I change the side height to 4 feet and hit apply, that moves up nicely. The chord length is 15. If we move this, we make this 50. Let's see what happens. Everything comes in together. And so our truss height, the last one, let's make that 15 feet all in all. And there you go. You can see that it's flexing up with it. So I'll hit OK. And now what I want to do is load this into a project. I don't have one open here, so let's just make a new one quick. I'm going to make 4 walls here. Oh, I'm using a metric template. No biggie. Okay, so I've got this, let's go to level 2. And now I'll go back to the truss. We called it family 2. You'd want to save this now, so we'll save that as whatever. We'll put that on the desktop for the time being. We'll call it truss example. Okay, so save that, load it into our project. Now what we're going to do is just draw a line from one side to the other, and if our settings are set accordingly, we just see a stick in here. So when you change your detail level, we're starting to see some of the framing members populated up to the cut line of this view. So let's go check this out in 3D, and you can see I placed it at the wrong level. So if I grab my truss and change that to level 2, change my offsets to 0, we see that come up. Now I just want to grab the rest of these walls and change their unconnected height here to level 2. Okay, so now we can see this a little bit better. And as far as the members go, if I come in here, zoom right in, you can see that this is like a steel member, and that doesn't really work for what I want to do here. I just want softwood lumber. So if I select the truss itself, I want to see these dashed lines. I'm going to go over to edit type here, and where you see this one, this parameter structural framing type, this is where I want to go for the framing type. But right now all I have is this wide flange in here. So I'll hit OK, and let's get some other framing. So if I want to just insert any random family into my project, I'm going to hit load family, and then go to, I'm going to go back out to the US Imperial and grab structural framing, and go to the wood folder, and there I have my dimensional lumber here. So if I click open, I'm just going to grab the 2x4 section and hit open. Now I'm going to grab the truss again, hit edit type, and in all these spots where top chord, vertical webs, all that good stuff, I'm going to change the framing type to dimensional lumber 2x4. Okay. Now I've seen this behave a little bit strange, where after I change it, it doesn't update for me. So typically, if you create a new one, that will take care of that. But this time it behaved nice, and this has all been changed to 2x4 framing. Okay, so now you can come back to level 2, you can align this back to the end or whatever the condition needs to be, and then create an array, and then whenever you know what your spacing has to be, then you can set the array to that spacing. Okay, so one thing to remember with these structural components, if your detail level isn't set to fine, then you're not going to see them. But one way to get around that is if you go into visibility graphics and you come down to the structural components, what you can do is select the top one, hold down shift, grab the other ones, and then where it says detail level, change that to fine, and then you will never have to worry about that again for that view. So if you don't want to worry about it view by view, put that in your view template and you'll never have to worry about it again. So that's just a brief walkthrough on trusses. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it answered some questions, and if you have any more, just leave them in the comment section below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for watching. Bye now.